Welcome to the WEREX channel, where we dive together into the depths of horror and mystery, revealing secrets that few dare to face. Before we begin this dark journey, don't forget to click the subscribe button and activate the bell, because I suffered while telling a story. Please be the first to watch every new terrifying story we present to you. If you're ready to dive into a world of psychological and supernatural horror, like the video to let us know you're with us on this dark adventure. Get ready, darkness is approaching. If you'd like a written story, the download link is in the description, in PDF format. Get your special drink ready and let's go. My name is Alvaro, and I was living a seemingly peaceful life, but to me, it was the paradise I had longed for since I was a child. I would wake up every morning filled with gratitude that fate had brought me together with a woman like Layla, my wife, my love, and my soulmate. Layla wasn't just a partner by my side, she was the light that illuminated my dark days and the pillar I leaned on when the world around me was tumbling. Our relationship was more than a love story, it was true peace amidst the chaos of life. Every morning, we would greet the sun with a shared smile, beginning our day with her soft voice as she made coffee in the kitchen, while she spoke to me and gently smoothed her hair. I would sit by the window, watching her and thinking how lucky I was that this woman chose to share her life with me. Even the breeze that drifted through the living room curtains felt different, lighter, softer, as if conspiring with us to preserve this tranquility. Our small house on the outskirts of the city was a piece of a dream. His garden was full of colors. The rose bushes we planted together in our first spring never stopped blooming, as if they knew our love had watered them. In the evenings, the scent of jasmine filled the air, bringing back memories of my childhood in my mother's house, when food had a special aroma, an unforgettable taste, and the warmth of a genuine presence. Layla would bring back that feeling for me every day, with a simple dish, a laugh, or a spontaneous word that made everything seem easier. I would spend my days in my study, filled with books, jotting down notes and contemplating future projects. Every time I looked up from the papers, the image of Layla smiling would come to mind, and I would feel an energy that gave me the strength to continue everything for us together. Evenings were a sacred date. I would return home and find her waiting for me at the door or in the kitchen, her eyes glowing as if bringing me all the peace I needed after a long day. Those moments, so simple on the surface, were the treasure of my entire life. Our relationship didn't need many words. Sometimes, with a single smile or a light touch of her hand, I understood what she wanted to say without her even saying a word. Even the silence between her and me was beautiful, full of meaning. We could sit for hours on the sofa in the garden without exchanging a word, yet still feel like we'd spoken a lot. I thought this kind of serenity would last forever, that our lives would continue in this warm rhythm until we grew old together. I never imagined that anything could disturb this profound peace, that the hand of darkness could extend into a place that seemed as sacred and safe as our home. But time never ceases to amaze, and it often holds within it the unexpected. Today, as I remember every moment with Layla, her laughter when she saw a new rose in the garden, her voice as she called me to dinner, the warmth of her hands in mine, the beat of her heart close to my chest, I realized what a true blessing we were experiencing, one whose full value we never fully appreciated at the time. I didn't know that those golden moments were merely the calm before the storm, and that darkness was already watching us from afar, waiting for the opportunity to intrude into our lives with deadly calm. I thought the happiness I was experiencing was untouchable, but I discovered too late that the most beautiful things in this life are also the most fragile, and that love, no matter how great, doesn't always protect against fate if it decides to leave us with an unhealed wound. Not many days had passed since our quiet life when something mysterious began to appear in Layla's behavior. At first, I thought it was just simple fatigue. She would say she felt exhausted, would struggle to get out of bed, and would complain of a headache that came and went. I thought it was normal due to the daily routine, or perhaps the pressure of housework. But something in her features began to change over time, slowly but noticeably, making my heart pound with a strange sensation. Day after day, Layla became weaker. Her complexion turned pale, and her lips lost the pink color I adored. Even her eyes that had once been full of joy and intelligence, became dim, as if the light had been drained from them, and her gaze became glassy, lost in an inexplicable void. I became increasingly worried and began taking her from one doctor to another, chasing any glimmer of hope. I ran tests, x-rays, and examinations of all kinds, yet the results were always completely normal. The doctors shrugged in resignation, saying she was physically fine, hinting that she might be suffering from psychological or mental fatigue. But I knew in my heart that wasn't a real explanation. It wasn't psychological, it wasn't physical, it was something else, something deeper. I watched her wither before me like a flower in autumn, and I could offer nothing but words of comfort, which were no longer enough. The feeling of helplessness tore me apart from the inside, perhaps even more than it tore her apart. Every night, I would return home, hoping to see her better, only to find her sitting silently, her eyes shining with a deep sadness whose source I couldn't understand, as if she were seeing something I couldn't see, or hearing voices I couldn't hear. I would try to make her laugh, to hug her, to tell her that everything would be okay, but she would only smile a small smile, as if to console me, then raise her eyes to something that didn't exist behind me. In those moments, I would feel a cold shiver run through my chest, as if an invisible person were crossing the space between us. Gradually, every day turned into a waking nightmare. When I sat next to her, I felt a cold breeze escaping her body, filling the space, as if the room had been emptied of life. Strange sounds began to appear, distant, faint whispers, sometimes mentioning her name, or muttering in an incomprehensible but threatening voice. I would look around, alarmed, but find nothing. Sometimes, I would see her place her hand on her chest, closing her eyes, as if an inner pain she could not describe was burning her. I would sit next to her, hold her hand, and pray to God to relieve her pain and restore to us the life we thought would last forever. As her condition worsened, I felt something dark approaching us, not an ordinary illness, but a malicious presence creeping into our lives, watching us, plotting something I had yet to understand. Every morning, I found myself waking up to a single thought: Layla was dying in front of me, and I was helpless. And deep in my heart, a sense of true fear began to form for the first time in my life. It wasn't a fear of death, but a fear of something nameless, something that lurks coldly, relishing the slowness of our collapse, as if whispering to me that our lives would never be the same again. Never imagined, not even in my worst nightmares, that this day would come so quickly, the day I dreaded and pretended not to see approaching. The night was unusually dark, so silent that I could hear my heartbeat, like an internal scream trying to warn me of something. I sat beside Layla's bed, watching her ragged breaths with burning anxiety, my hand clutching her cold, limp hand, trying to offer her some reassurance, even if only a lie. The room seemed to slowly close in on us. I felt something heavy in the air, as if an invisible force was pressing down on my chest, making breathing feel like hell. Suddenly, Layla's body began to tremble in a way I'd never seen before, as if she were struggling with something I couldn't see, something pulling her soul away. Her eyes widened in terror, staring up at the ceiling as if watching a real nightmare unfold before her, while I was helpless, weak, a mere witness to the inexplicable. I tried to hold her hand tighter, to scream her name, to persuade her to stay, but my hand was trembling, and my heart was pounding painfully. Something strange in the room was preventing me from approaching, as if an impenetrable black aura surrounded her. Then, within a few moments, which felt like an eternity to me, Layla let out a short, faint scream that pierced my entire soul, followed by absolute silence, the silence of death. I felt something inside me shatter. My heart. My mind. Everything. I looked into her open eyes and felt the life drain from them once and for all, leaving behind a terrible frost. The world hadn't just collapsed, it had ended. But the true horror wasn't in her death alone. After the screams in my chest subsided, I noticed something terrifying on her pillow. A strange inscription that hadn't been there before. A twisted mark, shapes that looked like symbols from a language that didn't belong to any world I knew. The mark glowed a pale green, with a light flowing through it as if it were pulsing with life, even though Layla no longer had a pulse. I couldn't understand. I took a step back, my hands trembling, and something inside me said in a faint but clear voice, "This isn't a natural death, but rather the beginning of something terrifying, something beyond the boundaries of humanity, logic, religion, and science." I felt the entire room fill with strange smells, and an unbelievable chill began to creep over my body. It was as if I wasn't alone in the room. The mark on the pillow seemed to be watching me too, calling to me, or perhaps threatening me. Everything was silent, but inside me was screaming, "Run! Understand! This is a message." A mixture of panic, anger, and loss swept over my body. I knelt beside her, sobbing and shaking, not knowing whether to embrace her cold body or flee from this darkness that was beginning to swallow everything around me. I realized that our peaceful life was only a brief interlude, and that some force had been watching us for a long time, waiting for this moment to strike. I was alone in a way I'd never felt before. I sat in a gloomy room, my wife's body before me, and a shining sign behind her, heralding the beginning of a new chapter of horror. I finally understood that our story didn't end here, it had just begun, and that the darkness I'd grasped so tightly was now engulfing my entire world, and it would show me no mercy. After the terrifying night of death that took away the most precious thing I had, I felt my entire world crumble beneath my feet. There was no light, no hope, no reason to continue. Yet, amidst all this devastation, there was something small inside me that still beat, something that refused to accept what had happened, that refused to believe Layla had left so suddenly, without explanation, without a voice, without justice. I knew her death was neither an accident nor a passing fate. There was something behind those extinguished eyes, something hidden behind the mysterious mark that appeared on her pillow the moment she died. From that day on, my life of grief became a journey of search, a journey toward answers at all costs. I began searching everywhere, asking for symbols, questioning people, reading books I'd never touched before. I felt afraid, yes, but the fear was becoming weaker than my desire to understand. Until one day, I found myself inside an abandoned library in one of the city's old alleys. Dust filled the place, and the smell was thick with mold and worn paper. Amidst the piles of decaying books, I found something I hadn't expected. A small book, its cover was torn, its pages yellowed and damp from the humidity, and its title barely legible. But as soon as I opened it, I found inside something resembling the mark I'd seen on Layla's pillow. I felt my blood begin to boil. The book spoke frankly of very dark magical rituals, of summoning spirits and harming people from afar, of spells whose sole purpose was destruction and the taking of life. With every page I turned, my horror turned to certainty. What had befallen Layla wasn't an illness, nor was it natural. Rather, it was a magical spell, a demonic act performed by an invisible hand, the hand of a sick person or a sorcerer devoid of heart and soul. At that thought, I no longer felt just sadness, but a raging anger. How did this person allow himself to toy with our lives? To steal from me the person I loved more than anything? Where did this cruelty come from that made him kill a blameless human being? The idea of revenge was transforming in my head from a mere thought to an inner calling, a goal that had become part of my entire being. I was no longer the same quiet man who used to write and plant roses with his wife. That man was gone. Now, I was something else, a man obsessed with seeking the truth, a man who had decided to delve into the same dark world that had kidnapped his wife, but this time he wouldn't be a victim. This time, I would be the one hunting down the perpetrator and making him pay for every moment of pain and destruction he had wrought in our lives. I felt my life had completely transformed. I no longer knew the meaning of comfort or reassurance. Everything had gone black inside my mind. I could only see the image of Layla dying before me, and the sound of her screaming. I felt that my soul would never rest until I found this charlatan and destroyed his life as he had destroyed mine. I had no other goal. And inside me, a single voice echoed endlessly. I will not allow what happened to pass as if it were merely fate. I will let your killer know that the real death has yet to begin. After the devastating truth behind Layla's death was revealed to me, my heart became a restless battlefield. On one hand, deep sadness mercilessly gnawed at my soul, while on the other, anger burned like embers beneath my skin, devouring every peaceful memory I had shared with her. I felt like I was no longer the same man, no longer the person who had known the simple joy of a cup of coffee and the smile of his wife every morning. Everything had changed, and everything inside me was screaming one question: how would I get revenge? At first, I tried to force myself back into normal life, into the routine that had provided me with some stability. I tried to go to work, to greet the neighbors with a smile as I had before, to walk the same streets I had walked with Layla, but I soon realized it was impossible. Everywhere seemed to have lost its color, and a strange chill filled the air wherever I went, as if the world had turned gray after her departure. Even the nighttime sounds I had grown accustomed to finding some solace had turned into whispers that repeated one word to my ears: revenge. Every shadow, every corner, every silence led me closer to a single idea: to enter the world that had stolen my soul. So I immersed myself in research. I left everything behind and began searching every corner for anything related to magic, ancient symbols, and unknown rituals. I began visiting abandoned libraries, forgotten places that people only enter out of fear or morbid curiosity. I sat amidst the dust of books and worn yellow pages, opening pages filled with mysterious symbols and spells written by hands whose owners were no longer among the living. I wasn't reading just for knowledge, but to feel that I possessed something, that I had the power to confront the thing that had stolen Layla from me. Little by little, I began to sense a strange force creeping within me. New ideas began to grow within me, ideas I hadn't allowed before. I began to feel my humanity itself receding step by step, as if the darkness I had been searching for was finding its way toward me, choosing me, whether by my will or by force. Every secret word I memorized, every symbol I drew in my notebook, took me further and further away from my old self. I felt that I wasn't just losing my old world, but also losing myself entirely, gradually transforming into another person who knew neither mercy nor remorse. Those around me noticed this, my friends, my relatives. They saw that I no longer shared a conversation or a smile with them, that my eyes no longer looked at them the same way. Some of them tried to talk to me, to advise me, to tell me that life doesn't end with death. But I couldn't hear anything. All I could hear was one thing inside my head: I must pay this cursed sorcerer for everything. Deep inside, the war was still raging, between a part of me that longed for my old self, and another part that wanted to burn everything just to feel that justice had been served. I began to feel that I had chosen a path from which there was no return, and that the price for this path was either my soul, or the soul of the person who took Layla from me. There was no way back. The old world I had known was over. All that remains now is one path, a path filled with black magic, madness, and revenge, and I am prepared to walk it until my last breath. As my obsession with revenge escalated, I began to realize that anger alone was no longer enough. Merely feeling resentment couldn't kill anyone, nor could it bring back those I'd lost. I needed to possess true power, a power beyond the reach of an ordinary human, a power that stemmed from the depths of darkness itself. And so began my journey into a world I'd never imagined I'd step foot into, a world of black magic, forbidden rituals, and spells no human mind dared utter. It wasn't just a superficial search. I was venturing into deserted, unfrequented places, ancient libraries forgotten by time, papers hidden in boxes in damp basements. Every book I found seemed to have been waiting for me for a long time, as if these books knew I'd need them one day. They were thickly covered in dust, and their smell was a mixture of mold and ash, yet I opened them with a strange euphoria. At first, something stirred within me: fear. These pages weren't innocent. I saw distorted symbols, words written in unfamiliar characters, and drawings of beings that didn't belong in our world. Every page stirred an ancient dread in me, a sense that there were eyes watching me from between the lines. But despite that, I persevered, because curiosity was stronger than fear, and the desire for revenge was stronger than anything. Day after day, I began to immerse myself in these books. I read about rituals for summoning the spirits of the dead, about ways to open secret portals between worlds, about talismans that granted their possessor the ability to control life energy and even human behavior. Some of these texts spoke openly of human sacrifice, of blood, and of souls that must be sacrificed to nourish the desired power. Despite the horror of what I was reading, I felt that every sentence granted me a portion of the power I was seeking. I no longer felt the disgust that had gripped me at the beginning. Instead, I began to feel a sense of fusion between myself and these books. It was as if they were slowly absorbing me, as if I and the darkness within them had become one. I often looked up from the pages to see that the night had swallowed half the room, and my shadow had grown longer and stranger. Loneliness became my only friend. I lived in near total isolation, mingling with no one, keeping away from people so that no one would stop me or try to bring me back to the light. I didn't want the light. The light was the source of my weakness. I just needed quiet, more silence, to listen to the whispers that began to appear in my mind every night, hidden voices explaining the symbols to me and directing me to the appropriate pages, as if an invisible entity was trying to help me, or control me. With every step I took into this dark world, I felt myself drifting further and further away from the old Alvaro. The man who grew roses and wrote poetry beside his wife died with Layla. The one living now was a new version, someone who feared neither darkness nor horror, but studied it, analyzed it, and prepared to use it as a weapon. I knew this path was fraught with danger, and that there was a heavy price for every knowledge I acquired. But I was also convinced that what I would gain would give me the power to destroy the one who had caused all this. I came to find in the desire for revenge a light of my own, a light that burned to protect me. And so, I decided to continue, whatever the consequences. After exhausting weeks of immersing myself in old books and strange scripts that I initially couldn't even look at without confusion, I finally felt the time had come. It was no longer just a dream of revenge, but a real plan, a tangible action waiting to be executed. The night was excessively dark, as if the sky wanted to announce itself as a witness to what was about to happen. I sat in my room, which had become more like a secret vault than a place of rest. I turned off all the lights in the house, and made do with 7 candles arranged symmetrically around the wooden table. The heavy books lay before me, open to pages marked with black markers. The symbols I had spent entire nights memorizing were meticulously drawn on the table in dark red ink whose source I didn't dare to consider. The air was thick, warm, and exhausting, as if the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for me. When I placed my hand over the drawings, I felt a strange constriction, an unnatural chill spreading through my extremities. My very core was trembling, but the desire to see the end, to taste true revenge, was stronger than any fear. I began reciting the incantations in a low voice, trembling at first, then gradually becoming clearer. The words were a spoken curse, as if they were not human, and although I didn't fully understand them, I could feel a force reverberating within them, like a rising sea tide, drowning everything in its path. With each recitation, the air shook, and the candles began to flicker, their flames elongating and shrinking in an unnatural way, as if interacting with something unseen. My entire body began to shake slightly, then more violently. It was a terrifying sensation, a sense that something supernatural was truly approaching me, watching me from somewhere I couldn't see. Then came the explosion. A dim red light, like a flash, shot through the center of the table, followed by a violent crash. Books flew, papers were torn, and the candles went out in a single moment as if the wind had violently swept across the room. I fell to the floor, instinctively covering my face, but the silence did not last long. I raised my head with difficulty to see a true catastrophe before me. Objects scattered, the table burned at the edges, and the air itself felt colder than ice. In one corner of the room, I saw it, a tall, eerie shadow, with no clear features, just a black mass moving very slowly. Something pulsated inside it, like a black fire, or eyes that only appeared for a split second. That shadow wasn't just a phantom. It was alive. It stood there, watching me, following my steps with eyes invisible, but I could feel them piercing my chest. It drew closer, step by step, and each step sent a death-like chill creeping into my spine. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to back away, but my back hit the wall, as if the room suddenly closed in on me. It hovered, sometimes expanding, then shrinking as if breathing. Strange whispers echoed, their source unknown, but calling my name. At that moment, I knew I had crossed a red line. It was no longer just an attempt or an experiment. I had opened a door that should have remained closed forever. I tried to stop the ritual, tear out the pages, erase the symbols, but to no avail. The shadow grew stronger, as if feeding off my fear. Yet, amidst all this terror, I felt something else begin to grow inside me, a sense of danger, oh yes, but also, a sense of power. It was as if, by seeing this being, I possessed a certain key, a first step on an irreversible path. I realized then that the first step had been taken, that this night would never be erased from my memory, that what had happened was not a failure but a clear warning from the world I had entered. I had touched the beginning of power, but the price? It would be greater than I had imagined, perhaps greater than I could bear. And yet, there was no going back. I had begun the journey, and I would not stop until I reached the end of this darkness, whatever the cost. After my first disastrous experience, the night turned into a terrifying, merciless enemy. It was no longer just a period of time during which I could close my eyes and sleep. Instead, it became a true battlefield, where terror lurks from every corner, and silence becomes the breathing of invisible beings. Every moment of quiet heralds the approach of shadow creatures, sleepless ghosts, and voices that shake my very being. I can no longer sleep like I used to. Every time I turn off the lights and try to rest my head on the pillow, a new hell begins. My body trembles, my eyes remain open despite my exhaustion. I hear a rattle in the air as if someone is breathing next to me, and I see the light in the room expanding and contracting in an unnatural way. Even the warmth I was accustomed to has been replaced by a strange chill running through my extremities. The nightmares are no longer just nightmares. They have become a parallel reality. I would wake up to screams whose source I couldn't understand. I would see the terrifying shadow, the same shadow that appeared in my first experience, standing behind the slightly open door or creeping along the far wall. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I would hear faint whispers echoing in my ear, words that were unclear but contained something harsh, something resembling a threat or mockery. Some nights, I would hear slow footsteps wandering in the corridor outside my room, even though I was alone in the house. Even when the sun rose, I found no peace. The day no longer held any security. Every shadow on the walls during the afternoon seemed to move, every person passing by felt watched. The ordinary sounds of the city became distorted, as if they were part of a nightmare that still haunted me even while I was awake. Sometimes I would see something moving out of the corner of my eye, and I would turn around to find something out of place, or an open door I hadn't opened. It was as if my entire house was conscious, alive with the horror I had created with my own hands. The days passed, and I fought sleep as if I were fighting death itself. Every night, the same dreams turn into a bloody tape. I see Layla, but her features aren't mine. Her face starts out normal, then turns into a dark entity with dead eyes. She screams in a strangled voice, looking at me as if trying to warn me or perhaps blame me. I wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, panting as if I've been running from a demon. I try to block out these images, squeezing my eyes shut, telling myself, this is just a dream. This is just a dream. But inside, I know the truth. There's no longer any difference between a nightmare and reality. My mind slowly began to unravel. I tried to cling to logic, trying to say it was just mental exhaustion, but something deep and dark, was intruding on my thoughts, stealing control of my emotions. The loneliness seemed to envelop me from all sides. I felt completely isolated inside a spiral from which there was no escape, and the terror was merciless and unrelenting. And in every moment of silence, a voice whispered inside me, like the echo of an approaching demon, "You'll never be the same again. You've crossed the line, and this is the price." That truth weighed heavier than anything else. I no longer knew the taste of sleep, nor the color of peace, and everything around me had grown dark, very dark. It was as if the whole world had gone out with me. In the dark night, as I was consumed by recurring nightmares and the loss of sleep that was eating me up, I felt an urgent need to know the whole truth about the world I had entered, about the mysterious force I was immersed in, and about the reason behind Layla's death and the resulting dark force lurking around me. Every step I took in this world raised more questions than answers, and every attempt to understand the reality around me ignited an inner fear I had never felt before. One day, after weeks of exhausting research in the alleys of the old city and forgotten libraries, after turning over every stone and opening every old book covered in dust, I found myself standing before an old man with mysterious features, wearing an ancient cloak, and whose eyes held a profound knowledge and extraordinary power I had never known before. Something about his posture, his silence, and his gaze forced a sense of both awe and curiosity in me, a feeling that I was confronted by someone who did not belong to this simple world I had once known. He knew everything about me before I could utter a single word, as if it were written in my energy, as if the whole world had told him what had happened to me. He looked at me deeply, his voice soft yet resonating deep within my soul. "Alvaro, the path you have chosen, there is no turning back." Awe gripped me at those words. I felt a chill creep into my bones, as if the air around me had become heavy and charged with something dark watching me. But something else drove me forward, curiosity, a desire for revenge, and a strange sense that I was compelled to move forward no matter the cost. The old man smiled a mysterious smile, full of mystery and secrets, and said in a low voice, "Every step you take now will lead you further into darkness. What you have begun is bigger than you, and more powerful than you can imagine. No sane person can go back after opening the doors you are about to open." I asked him about my wife and the reason behind what had happened to her, but his eyes, filled with wisdom and pain, wouldn't allow him to reveal anything else. He just whispered, "You set them free, and with this deprivation, you must pay the price." At that moment, I felt that everything I had experienced so far was only the beginning of a larger world, a world that would test everything within me, my strength, my weakness, my courage, and even my humanity. I felt the weight of responsibility, and a sense that the life I had known was over, and that the darkness I had entered would leave me no way back. I left the meeting carrying the weight of those words in my heart, feeling that each next step would lead me into the unknown. Yet, there was something inside me that resisted fear, something like a small flame of anger and revenge, a flame that drove me to continue, to explore, to walk into a world I was not yet ready for, a world that knew no mercy and waited only for those who dared to challenge it. After the old sorcerer's warnings, I felt I could not back down. Anger and a desire for revenge took over completely, and I realized that the power I sought would only come if I transcended all fear and drew closer to the unknown that lurks beyond the darkness, where secrets no one had dared to discover before. I prepared myself for a ritual I had never dared to imagine, surrounded by ancient books whose pages now breathed mystery, strange symbols carefully drawn on the floor, and strange tools used for sacrifices and forgotten rituals. Every element of the ritual was like a fresh wound in my heart, reminding me of Layla, the injustice done to her, and the void her death had left in my life. The ritual began, and I uttered the strange words, softly at first, then echoed in the room like whispers creeping in from every corner, punctuated by a faint ringing like an echo of another world. The air around me felt heavy, candles burned for no reason, and shadows moved unnaturally, as if dancing to the rhythm of a force I could not control. I felt something bigger than me begin to awaken, something dark watching my every move, testing my resolve and my silence. Then something unexpected happened. A small door began to open in front of me, its light dim but ominous, emanating from it a strange whisper and distant sounds the likes of which I had never heard before. Every cell in my body trembled with terror, but the flame of revenge, the desire for justice for Layla, drove me forward despite a deep fear that consumed all sense of security. The world beyond the door was completely different from anything I had known. So dark it seemed the light was ashamed to enter, filled with shifting shadows writhing like snakes, strange voices emerging from every direction, and whispers penetrating my mind, whispering my name. It was as if every step I took brought me closer and closer to losing my humanity. I felt the strength I'd been searching for all along, but I also felt the price I would pay, a price that wasn't just pain or fear, but something deeper, something that touched the core of my soul. At that moment, I realized the truth. What I had embarked on wasn't just a path to revenge, but a perilous journey into a merciless world, a world of jinn and demons, a world that could swallow every part of me if I wasn't careful and vigilant with every move. Every whisper, every shadow, every voice carried a message, and every miscalculated step could be the end. But despite the terror, despite the voices, shadows, and whispers, a strange feeling gripped me, a feeling that I was close to being able to control something greater than any power I'd ever known, something that could give me the power to exact revenge I so desired, the power to control the fate of those who harmed Layla, no matter the price, no matter the sacrifices, no matter the losses I would pay in this mysterious and dark world.